Good evening and welcome, 7 o'clock. We got 12 tribes to get through, so we should better probably get started here. Good to see everyone this evening. All right, we'll jump right into it. So previously in the Conquest, we took a look at Numbers 13. We went through Numbers 13 and 14 to understand the background of Caleb. We talked about how the people, the other spies said that we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them. But Caleb, he doesn't come off that way at all. I was saying one man that didn't see himself as a grasshopper surely was Caleb. As he thinks in his heart, so is he. We looked at Numbers 14:24, what God said about Caleb. He said, "But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me fully, I will bring him to the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it." We talked about how Caleb was also subjected to 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And again, I couldn't imagine what that time must have been like for him. He's not mentioned during that time. But then finally, after 40 years plus 5 additional years of conquest, Caleb makes the request to inherit some land and settle down. But he doesn't pick an easy place that's already conquered to settle down in. No, and he doesn't. Instead, he picks Kiriath Arba, or Hebron, which is a fortified city inhabited by giants. He says, give me this high country. And what does he do? He goes and drives them out in Joshua chapter 15. He drives out the 3 sons of Anak. These were giants, descendants of the Nephilim. And then he settles the town. He then offers his daughter in marriage to whoever would capture neighboring Debir, a challenge accepted by his nephew Othniel. And his daughter shows that she too has ambitions for settling the land, getting her husband first to ask for a field from Caleb, her father, and then she asks for and is granted springs of water by her father as well. Okay, so not a lot of time on review from last week, because tonight we need to talk about the allotment of the tribes. We'll discuss the good land. And this is the dividing of the land. This is a subject that actually spans a good chunk of the book, from Joshua chapter 13 to 21. And I will just say right now, this has been a little tiring going over this material in the past couple weeks. So if you have a particular interest in a tribe or a region, what I'm thinking about doing is calling out maybe 1 or 2 interesting things that I found interesting. But if you're like, man, I'm Team Zebulun, I just know all about Zebulun, we want to hear from you tonight, okay? Once we get to Zebulun, you jump right in there. I'm going to pull out again at least a couple things of interest in each allotment, but don't stop me or don't feel like you can't rewind if there's something you want to call out. And this could easily go, most of tonight, maybe even into a little bit of next week. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so as we started at the end of last week, we see a very elderly man, and he may be on his deathbed. His eyes are clouded with cataracts. He's 147 years old, and he's around him is a group of 12 men, and these are his sons, and they're all grown men as well. And I joked last week that one of them walks like an Egyptian, if I couldn't help it. Because Joseph, of course, is the second in command in Egypt at that time. He knows his life is coming to an end, and he's called his sons together to bless them. And we're going to use the blessings of Jacob in Genesis 49 as an introduction for each tribe's allotment. And again, I was saying if this was a show or whatever, I'd have like someone very distinguished with a voice, like Anthony Hopkins or Morgan Freeman or something, right? So some of these blessings are going to be pretty easy to decipher. And I started looking at this as a way of introducing these. I'm like, oh yeah, this fits. But then as I'm going through, I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about here, and this doesn't make any sense. So some of it I will question part of that. And to be clear, not all of the blessings of Jacob have just to do with the allotment, but some do, as we'll see. First, let's hear what Moses has to say about the land the Israelites are inheriting. And I'll put it up on the screen. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 7 through 10. "For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs, flowing out in the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper, and you shall eat and be full, and you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land he has given you. And that's Deuteronomy 8, 7 through 10. This is a good land that the people of Israel will be inheriting. It's a land full of natural resources. It's ready for cultivating flocks. It's ready for herds. It's even ready for mining resources. Okay, so now we're going to go through the tribes in order as they're presented in Joshua. And this starts with the 2.5 tribes east of the Jordan River. So let's start with the blessing of Reuben. This is from Genesis chapter 49, verses 3 and 4. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the firstfruits of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Okay, so this blessing is awkward for sure, and his brothers are there too. It suddenly turns into a pretty awkward scene right off the bat, and this is referring to an incident in Genesis 35:22 when Reuben slept with his father's concubine. But what does this blessing have to do with Reuben's allotment? So there, I guess you could say right off the bat, there's some symmetry here between the firstborn and the first to inherit. However, as we will see, Reuben will not have the preeminence. The tribe of Reuben is not going to have a place of importance in Israel, not of critical importance. So let's get into a little bit of the tribe of Reuben, and this is kind of how I am planning to present all the tribes. You have the overview on the left side here of all the tribes. No clicker. And then on the right side, just Reuben itself. So Reuben is actually just to the right of the Dead Sea there. And let's see, a couple things to call out here. The boundaries of this land are actually laid out in Numbers 32, 1 through 5, which we kind of looked at already. And actually, let's turn on over there. Let's go over to Numbers 32. We were looking at some of the borders of the Promised Land put out in Numbers, but there's going to be more detail here for us. Numbers 32, we're going to read 1 through 5. Now the people of Reuben and the people of Gad had a very great number of livestock, and they saw the land of Gezir and the land of Gilead. And behold, the place was a place for livestock. So the people of Gad and the people of Reuben came and said to Moses and to Eleazar the priest, and to the chiefs of the congregation, Atarah, Dibon, Gezir, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eliath, Sebon, Nebo, and Beon, the land that the Lord struck down before the congregation of Israel is a land of livestock, and your servants have livestock. And they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. And then Moses is going to challenge them and say, okay, but you're still going to help us with the conquest, right? You're not going to abandon us. Your fighting men are still going to come on over and be a part of this. And they reassure him that they will. Okay, so in some ways we're starting with the softball here, and in other ways I think this is going to be very, very typical. I tried to figure out like what set each tribe apart from the other, and it's kind of hard to see, but in the end, the scale on some of these maps is not that great. I mean, we're talking about a couple 100 miles. It's not like the difference between Uganda and Estonia, for example, just to pick two random places on the globe. So I was trying to think, okay, what's their economy like in Reuben, and how is it different from their economy up in, I don't know, Asher? And it's probably similar in a lot of ways. You're probably, again, looking at agrarian. In this case, it says right here what they want to do. They want this land for livestock, so it's good pasture land. But I wouldn't imagine that it's all that different than some of the other places. But what else can we call out from the land of Reuben? Reuben has been given the land of Sihon, the king of the Amorites. Again, we're east of the Jordan. It also, as you can see in the map near the top middle, it has Mount Nebo within its borders. This is a mountain at about 2,600 feet. This is the mountain that Moses went up to view the Promised Land before his death. And then just generally, as you can see from its boundaries, you have the Jordan and the Dead Sea on the west. You have Gad on the north. You have the desert on the east. And then you have Moab on the south. Now, this is also going to be, this is one of the things I was trying to keep an eye out on, like who are their neighbors, right? For Moab, this is going to be a bit of an issue pretty early on. In Judges 3, God's going to strengthen the hand of Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel. So anytime the Moabites gain strength, Reuben's going to be kind of on the front line of a lot of those conflicts, as I would imagine Judah would be as well. Okay, if you really have something else on Reuben, now's your chance. Great. Going on to Gad. All right, here's the blessing to Gad. Raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. This is Genesis 49:19. Jacob blessing Gad. So Gad is given the land north of Reuben, and this is in the area in the rest of the territory captured from Scion. It's bordered on the west by the Jordan, from above the Dead Sea to the Sea of Galilee, on the south by Reuben, and on the east by the desert and the Amorites, and then on the north by the half-tribe of Manasseh. And like Reuben, they were looking for good lands for their flocks. And I didn't do as much research on what those flocks were. I mostly assumed, sheep, cows. But what about Jacob's blessing? If we take a look at 1 Chronicles, and I should have put this on the screen as well, 1 Chronicles 12:8 describes the Gadites a little bit when the mighty men of Gad join David. So in 1 Chronicles 12:8, from the Gadites there went over to David at the stronghold in the wilderness mighty and experienced warriors, expert with shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions and who were swift as gazelles upon the mountains. And then it names them. And so there were mighty warriors from the tribe of Gad, and this might refer back to the blessing of Jacob as well, that there will be raiders, but it's also going to make the tribe of Gad strong. I should also call out, and maybe I will here in a second. Yeah, I'll call this out from Manasseh in just a second. Okay, so let's talk about Transjordan Manasseh. This is, I did want to show this as well. I was trying to find some visual for Gad. This is actually at Adam. It's a bridge over the Jordan River, and you can see Adam is down in the south middle part there on the Jordan. And if we'll recall, this is where the waters of the Jordan River were backed up when the Israelites crossed the Jordan back in, I've lost track of my chapters, chapter 3 of Joshua. Okay, so on to Transjordan Manasseh. I'm going to get to the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh when we consider them in a little bit. So I won't put that up on the screen just yet. But let's take a look. If you're still in Numbers 32, that's going to be convenient. This is actually a fascinating account to me. Numbers 32:39. And Moses gave to them, to the people of Gad and to the people of Reuben, and to the half-tribe of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the land and its cities with their territories, the cities of the land throughout the country. And it says what the people of Gad built. We're going to skip down to verse 39, and the people of Reuben. Okay, verse 39. And the sons of Machir, the son of Manasseh, went to Gilead and captured it, and dispossessed the Amorites who were in there. And Moses gave Gilead to Machir, the son of Manasseh, and he settled in it. And Jair, the son of Manasseh, went and captured their villages, and called them Hovath Jair. And Nobah went and captured Kinneth and its villages, and called it Nobath, after his own name. It's like Nobathville. Okay. So again, this is the land of the king of Bashan, Og. This is Gilead and what's now referred to as the Golan Heights, east of the Jordan. And to me, it reads like some of these clans of Manasseh just went and kind of took over this land of Gilead. It's like, oh, hey, these guys are getting some pasture land. That looks like a good idea to us too. And they just kind of went in and took over some towns. Then Moses grants this land to them. It almost reads like an afterthought here. Most of chapter 32 in Numbers is about Reuben and Gad, and then these other guys kind of end up doing something as well. And so other people from Manasseh, they just did likewise. They captured some villages, and they get this land. The Machirites, these are the descendants of the firstborn of Manasseh. They're described as a clan of war in Joshua 17:1. It says in Joshua 17:1, to Micah, the firstborn of Manasseh, the father of Gilead, were allotted Gilead and Bashan because he was a man of war, which again suggests that they were interested in, they had the ambition to just kind of go on in and take this land. I will call out, at least in my Bible in the back, I was looking at in the ESV, the 12 tribes, and I could have put this up here in comparison, but the borders here between East Manasseh and Gad are different on different maps. This one kind of shows Gad going all the way up to the Sea of Galilee. And in the back of my Bible, it does that too, but it really shows East Manasseh dipping down into that land. That's because that is the territory of Gilead, and since the passages and Numbers say that they went in and took Gilead, that was that's how you get kind of a discrepancy in some of the maps. And I wish I would have put the quote up on the screen and written down where I saw it, but in my research, when I was looking at all these different borders and territories and tribes, there was a great quote online. Someone said this is, some of the most confusing, stuff in all the Bible. It made me feel better. So it's like there's a whole, there are the allotments, given in Joshua, but they don't always match up with what was actually, claimed and historically how things end up. And we'll get into some of that for some of the other tribes too. There was one other thing I wanted to call out. Let's go over to 1 Chronicles chapter 5. I should also put a plug in. So first, while we're going to 1 Chronicles 5, I should also put a plug in for a website, gotquestions.org. I don't agree with all their discussion, but it's kind of neat because you could search for each and every tribe, and they're like, what could we learn from the tribe of Asher, of Zebulun? And I was looking into that a lot. So that's a good resource to just like a 5-minute read. Okay, 1 Chronicles 5 and 23. The members of the half-tribe of Manasseh lived in the land. They were very numerous, from Bashan to Baal-Hermon, Senir, and Mount Hermon. These were the heads of their fathers' houses: Epher, Ishi, Eliel, Ezriel, Jeremiah, Hodaviah, and Jediel. Mighty warriors, famous men, heads of their fathers' houses. These guys are like celebrity warriors. But they broke faith with the God of their fathers and whored after the gods of the peoples of the land, whom God had destroyed before them. So the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, the spirit of Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and he took them into exile, namely the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe Manasseh, and brought them to Hala, Haber, Hara, and the river Gozan to this day. So we can kind of see this is a kind of a sad way to close, looking at the 2.5 tribes east of the Jordan. They were very capable people. They were, famous people. They were warriors, but they couldn't stop themselves from worshiping the gods of the people in the land. And God rendered judgment on them through the Assyrians. Okay, moving on to, this is a picture of, this is going to be Mount Hermon. And this is pretty far north, and you'll notice that there's snow up there. You can, some of the other pictures are showing people skiing, and I don't usually associate this part of the world with, ski resorts. But Mount Hermon gets up to, I believe, about like over 9,000 feet. So if you wanted, but then it's in Syria, so it might not be the best ski resort for you. So, all right. Let's go with Judah. This is a bit longer reading. The blessing to Judah in Genesis 49. Jacob said, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down. He crouched as a lion and as a lioness. Who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he has washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. It's Genesis 49, 8-12. So we're now over in back to the book of Joshua. And we're now into chapter 15 for the allotment to Judah. So Joshua 14 introduces the allotment west of the Jordan as being held by Lot. However, the casting of lots doesn't start until chapter 18. We'll get to that. After Judah, Ephraim, and Manasseh. Honestly, I'm not sure why. I entertain any thoughts, if anyone does know. So instead of Reuben, Judah is going to have the preeminence among his brothers. And as we just read, the scepter will not depart from Judah. For us, in hindsight, we can equate this to the southern kingdom, to the lineage of David, that perpetual kingdom that was promised to the descendants of David if they would be faithful to the Lord. And Judah itself is going to become its own nation with that line of kings. Let's take a look at the map here. Obviously, Judah just geographically dominated the entire southern territory. As far as boundaries go, it goes south to the Brook of Egypt, referred to in chapter 15 as the Brook of Egypt. It's thought to be the Wadi El Arish. It goes west to the Mediterranean, north to the territory of Dan and Benjamin, and then east by the Dead Sea and Edom. And it's fascinating that chapter 15 goes into detail about all the different cities and villages. And I'm trying to figure out how are these grouped, and you can see how they're all a lot of these are listed up on the map. And I believe what's going on here in chapter 15 is that we're getting them geographically grouped. A number of the ones in the Southland and the Negev are listed in 20 through 32. There are 38 cities listed from verse 20 to verse 32, but at the end of verse 32 it says 29 cities and their villages. This is going to be because some of these cities and villages are going to be given to Simeon, and we'll get there in a little bit. There's the lowland in the central area, 14 cities given from verses 33 to 36, and then 16 cities from 37 to 41, and then 9 cities from 42 to 44. East of the coast and to the Philistine territory in verses 45 through 47. This is a good call out here. You can see over by the Mediterranean, you've got Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. That's going to be the land of the Philistines, and it's going to obviously be a source of conflict in this region. Still is. And then the hill country on the west side near the Dead Sea. For example, Hebron, which Caleb is also mentioned in chapter 15 as we looked at last week. And then finally, in the end, in verse 61, we have in the wilderness, and then it even mentions the city of Salt, which really sounds like a cool place. I don't know, but you can tell again that there's a hint of the natural resources that God is blessing and providing for the people. And verse 63, but the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the people of Judah, could not drive them out, so the Jebusites dwell with the people of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. So obviously this is written pre-David. And you can see Jerusalem is up near the top, near the border of Benjamin. It's right on the border. So David's going to conquer Jerusalem. That's usually dated around 1010 BC, so that's nearly 400 years after this allotment. Okay, any other calls about Judah? I feel like I didn't do Judah justice. It's a lot of land. All right, we're going to keep going through then. And of course I had to include a picture of Jerusalem. There's again the western wall. It was a privilege to be able to go there myself a couple years ago. All right, Ephraim and Manasseh, these are also referred to as the people of Joseph. And indeed, the blessing is given to Joseph by Jacob in Genesis 49. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. His branches run over the wall. The archers bitterly attacked him, shot at him, and harassed him severely, yet his bow remained unmoved. His arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. By the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that crouches beneath, blessings of the breast and of the womb. The blessings of your father are mighty beyond the blessings of my parents, up to the bounties of the everlasting hills. May there be on the head of Joseph and on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. Okay, so Ephraim is chapter 16 of Joshua, and then the other half of Manasseh is chapter 17. But notice again, like verse 4, for example, the people of Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim received their inheritance. So these terms are used interchangeably. I do think it's interesting just looking back at that promise. I was trying to figure out what to pull out from here. I don't know. His branches run over the wall. In some ways, these tribes are going to go, Trans-Jordan. I don't know if that's what that's referring to or not. Honestly, this is where I was starting to go, okay, I'm not sure I understand it as much. So what about the land of Ephraim, though? It's described in verses 5 through 10, its boundaries. Ephraim is landlocked between Dan on the south and west, Benjamin on the south, the Jordan on the east, and Manasseh on the north. The town of Shiloh is in the land of Ephraim, and we can liken Shiloh to the first capital city of Israel. The tabernacle is going to be set up in Shiloh in Joshua 18, which we'll get to in a couple minutes. And it's going to stay, that's where the rest of the land is going to be divided. And the ark and the tabernacle are going to stay there until the time of Samuel, when the ark is captured by the Philistines in battle. And it ends up in Kiriath Jearim until it was moved by David to Jerusalem. The tabernacle is going to be moved to Gibeon by the time of Solomon, because we looked at that earlier as well. This is the excavation at Shiloh as well. They've uncovered a number of ancient structures there. So the first capital is in Ephraim. If we take a look at verse 10, we start to see some of the unfinished business again of the conquest. Verse 10 of chapter 16. However, they did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer. So the Canaanites have lived in the midst of Ephraim to this day, but have been made to do forced labor. So some of the peoples that weren't eradicated or driven out, they were made to forced labor instead. They were enslaved. So Ephraim will be used to describe the northern kingdom of Israel after the division of Israel and Judah. For example, in Isaiah 7:2, the king of Judah is told that Syria is in league with Ephraim. So the terms are used synonymously. And that is the head of Samaria is Ephraim, and Syria is Damascus. So Samaria is actually going to be up in Manasseh, but you can see how the term Ephraim is used interchangeably with the northern kingdom. Okay, what about Manassas? This is getting in, Manasseh. Manassas, I'm getting into civil war. Manasseh is given in Joshua 17. Let's take a look at verses 11 through 13. Also in Issachar and in Asher, Manasseh had Bethshean and its villages, and Ibleam and its villages, and the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, and the inhabitants of Endor and its villages, and the inhabitants of Tanakh and its villages, and the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages. The third is Naphath. Yet the people of Manasseh could not take possession of these cities, but the Canaanites persisted in the dwelling in that land. Now when the people of Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not utterly drive them out. We see that as a repeated refrain here. Now it is interesting, though, from these passages that they also had some land in Issachar. And I don't know if this gets into timing, because Issachar hasn't been given land yet. It might be kind of a vice versa thing. As far as the borders here, Ephraim borders it on the south, the sea on the west, Asher, Zebulun, Issachar on the north, and the Jordan River on the east. And the future capital of the northern kingdom of Israel is going to be here in the territory of Manasseh, that being Samaria. So Manasseh contains Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. These are the sites of the renewal of the covenant of Joshua chapter 8. Let's take a look at 14 through 18 as well. This also stands out. Then the people of Joseph, again referring to both Ephraim and Manasseh together, they spoke to Joshua, saying, "Why have you given me but one lot and one portion as an inheritance, although I am a numerous people, since all along the Lord has blessed me?" And Joshua said to them, "If you are a numerous people, go up by yourselves to the forest, and there clear ground for yourselves in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaim, since the hill country of Ephraim is too narrow for you. The people of Joseph said, the hill country is not enough for us. Yet all the Canaanites who dwell in the plain have chariots of iron, both those in Bethshean and its villages, and those in the valley of Jezreel. Then Joshua said to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, you are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one allotment only, but the hill country shall be yours. For though it is a forest, you shall clear it and possess it to its farthest borders. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have chariots of iron, and though they are strong. Okay, so the people of Ephraim and Manasseh, they've already been given what, again, on the map looks like a large portion of territory, but they're saying this isn't enough. And this was also something that I was trying to figure out, but didn't do a very great job of that, is, okay, how much of this land is actually inhabitable? Because you get the impression from here that some of the hill country, which is going to be closer to the Jordan River, just wasn't very suitable for developing. But Joshua challenges them on that. It's like, okay, let's save some of the lowlands and the plains for the rest of the tribes. Richard, here, let me run you a mic.
I was just going to mention, you was talking about the land that's good land from Beit Shan moving towards Megiddo, all through that area there in the north part of Manasseh. That's the Jezreel Valley. Mm-hmm. And that is extremely fertile land, but it was also an extremely important geographical area in terms of invaders later on when Israel will be completely established as a nation. Any people that would attack the land would always cut the land in half right there at the Jezreel Valley. And so Megiddo as a fortress is always a major stay for the children of Israel. In fact, Solomon had his chariot forces at Megiddo to control the plain itself. And so when Assyria came in and took the northern tribes into captivity, they came through Jezreel. When the Babylonians came in and took Judah, they came in through Jezreel. They cut the country in half and then invaded north and south. So when for the Manassites to say, this is not a good land, well, it was an incredibly good land, especially as it moved. The further north you go in Israel, the better the land gets. The further you go south, the worse it gets. Unless you're in the fertile crescent or in the Shephelah, then you have the hill country, and that's beautiful land too.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Very cool. So Richard is Team Manasseh. Thank you. Okay, so then they get into surveying the remaining land, and this is probably where we're going to start winding down for this week. Let's take a look at 18, 1 through 10. Again, this kind of breaks up a lot of the list of the cities and the villages. Then the whole congregation of the people of Israel assembled at Shiloh. This is the first capital now, and set up the tent of meeting there. The land lay subdued before them. That's another great transitionary verse, right? The land had rest from war. The land lay subdued before them. It kind of paints its own scene. Verse 2, there remained among the people of Israel 7 tribes whose inheritance had not yet been apportioned. So Joshua said to the people of Israel, how long will you put off going in to take possession of the land, which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you? Provide 3 men from each tribe, and I will send them out, that they may set out and go up and down the land. They shall write a description of it with a view to their inheritances, and then come to me. They shall divide it into 7 portions. Judah shall continue in his territory on the south, and on the house of Joseph shall continue in their territory on the north. And you shall describe the land in 7 divisions, and bring the description here to me. And I will cast lots for you here, before the Lord our God. The Levites shall have no portion among you, for the priesthood of the Lord is their heritage. And Gad and Reuben and the half-tribe Manasseh have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan eastward, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave them. Verse 8, so the men arose and went, and Joseph charged those who went to write the description of the land, saying, go up and down in the land and write a description and return to me, and I will cast lots for you here before the Lord in Shiloh. So the men went and passed up and down the land and wrote in a book a description of it by towns in 7 divisions. Then they came to Joshua to the camp at Shiloh, and Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord. And there Joshua apportioned the land to the people of Israel, to each his portion. So this is kind of like the first big survey mission of the rest of the land. And it's fascinating. In verse 3, it's almost like he's charging these other 7 tribes, like, what's wrong with you guys? This is the way it kind of reads. How long will you put off going in to take possession of the land? Where had a lot of the people been at this time, or where were they? Where was the camp set up? When they were during the conquest, in a number of passages, they were returning to the camp at Gilgal, which is close to Jericho. I don't know if the remaining 7 tribes are just hanging out in this big camp there, or if they had migrated over to Shiloh. But it sounds like Joshua is now kind of putting the spurs to them a little bit, saying, all right, it's time to get moving. Maybe this suggests that some of the tribes, like the tribes of Joseph, like Judah, and those on the other side of the Jordan, had already had a healthy ambition and a desire to settle down. Okay, so they're going to cast the lots for the remaining land. I'd love to have a lesson sometime on casting lots. It's a fascinating practice. We don't really know all that much about it, but it seems to be all right in this case. My sports brain keeps thinking about like the NBA draft lottery or something like that. This would have been some draft lottery to be gathered around this table and see who gets the next land. I'd like to get into a little bit of some of that survey, though. I'm kind of imagining the scene at Shiloh, and they're coming back, and they're describing the entire land. And even though it's not here in the passage, so you could say I'm reading into it a little bit, before we get into the actual allotment, I'd like to talk a little bit more about a couple of facets of the land, and just try to keep us from doing maps for 40 more minutes, which we won't do. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about, no, that's not the right slide. That's mean. Okay, let's talk, okay, we're going to talk about villages. So what about cities and villages? You'll notice that as I was reading through these chapters, and I know we just kind of went very quickly over them, but take a look, for example, turn back to chapter 15. You'll see in the land of Judah, when they're describing all these cities, they say 29 cities with their villages. 14 cities with their villages is verse 36. At the end of all these sections, these areas, they talk about cities with their villages. Well, what does that mean? How large are these? How large are these cities? How large are these villages? What's that all about? I think so. As a reminder, this is still the Bronze Age, which is kind of dated to 3300 to 1200 BC. Cities here are going to be fairly small compared to what we have today. I think it was Richard that pointed out Jericho had only about 2,500 people in it. Hazor in the north had about 20 to 30,000, and it was considered the largest city in Canaan. In Joshua 8:25, the city of Ai is given a population of 12,000. But what about villages? What do they mean, cities with their villages? Well, we can actually see this concept even in effect today. This is a picture of a city with its villages in present-day Jordan. You can kind of see this area up here, the city in the distance. But then away from the city, you have a number of buildings, a number of dwelling places in its own separate village. And a lot of this is going to be centered around the agriculture. It's going to be where a number of the extended family, or maybe even the clans, would have their own village nearby to the cities. Another example of this, which is kind of a striking way to look at this, is the kibbutz. This is a kibbutz Nahalal in Israel today, and it's a community centered around farmland. Now, I don't think that necessarily they were so radial in ancient times. I imagine kind of an odd pattern to the fields in ancient Israel. But I think the structure is kind of similar. You have fields, then you have your villages, and then you have the cities as the larger communities. I'll probably call it there. We're just about at 7:40. We're going to discuss a couple other aspects of the land And then we'll get into the allotment of the tribes next week, and then we'll also look at the Levites and the cities of refuge. So thank you for your time tonight. I know that was a lot of information, a lot of maps, and that's kind of how this section of Joshua is. Appreciate it.